Hi everyone, I'm Yo and this is Virginia. Welcome to our YouTube channel, Knowing, Caring, and Loving Your Lady Parts. So today we have an exciting video for you about pelvic organ prolapse. So what is this thing that might be bulging outside of my vagina, unfortunately, and sometimes referred to short form acronym POP. POP. So it's important to learn about this area so you won't get any of this stuff. So please stay tuned and let's get started. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. Thanks so much for tuning in with Virginia and I. And please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and tell your friends. And let's get started about describing what a pelvic organ prolapse is, or a POP. So I don't know if you remember, and if you haven't tuned into my female anatomy video or the one about the pelvic floor muscles, I talk about the pelvic floor organs in particular because the pelvic floor muscles help, one of their functions is to support these organs. So let me get Myrtle the girdle to help show you again. So everyone, this is Myrtle the girdle. Oh, and you will see that she has a little bit of a thing going right now. So that would be the bladder coming down a little bit through the anterior wall of the vagina. But just wanted to show you, and hopefully her pelvic organs won't drop out when I'm doing this. So if you see the inside, so what the pelvic floor muscles do, remember, is it's like the bottom of a purse. So it holds things up and it holds these organs from dropping out, which is called a POP, a pelvic organ prolapse. So they sit in the pelvic floor cavity, this area here, and you'll see here that this is, okay, this is not to scale, by the way. I had to find out of my kids' toys. So this is the rectum, and this is the uterus, and the bladder is tucked in there. It's a little wee small bladder, but it's there, okay? So you can see how they kind of lie in different positions. And you can also see from this diagram up here how they see in a lateral view where the pelvic floor muscles sling it up, and you can see how the bladder goes first in the front, and then behind it is the uterus, and then behind that is the rectum. Okay, so what happens is when there is a deficiency or something is weak, and it could be the ligaments too of the uterus, not just always the pelvic floor. And of course, having multiple babies does not help in terms of pressure to these organs. Then what happens is when you have something that's a little bit lower or bulging out, that is called a prolapse. And you can get different organs prolapsing out. Sometimes because of how they lie in the cavity though, you may not be able to see all of them. And because the bladder is in front first, it may come out first, and then behind that will follow the uterus, and maybe you'll see the rectum, and unfortunately if it gets really bad, you might see the insides, which I usually don't see because it's really far gone by then. So if you look at this diagram here, you'll see different prolapses in the diagram that outline that. So here, what you see is the bladder is hanging out a little bit. So this is the vagina cut out. So there's different degrees of prolapse, and you don't want that to happen. When you start seeing something hanging out and you're looking down between your legs and you see something, that's usually not a good sign. You want to prevent things from actually coming out of the vagina like this. So you want to prevent this where you see a balloon coming out. You want to keep things lifted and up and not even showing at all. If you remember my video, Female Anatomy 1 and 2, we met our vulva, so we knew what our normal was. So in order for you to assess if you have something low, remember the best thing to do is take a mirror and have a look. And what you want to do is do it standing because it's more functional, because you have the force of gravity pulling things down, and you want to increase the pressure from above, so cough or bear down, and then see if anything's low. So what you will see if something is low when you cough or bear down by increasing the pressure, you may see something kind of sticking out a little bit like this. Okay, that's a little bit out in terms of Virginia. If it's your bladder, you'll see a little bit of a balloon. If I use Myrtle the girdle again, so if you envision that that's the vagina, it's cut out though, but those are the pelvic floor muscles trying to support it, you would see a balloon like this coming out, and it would even come out more if you're standing like that. So what are you looking for? So when you look at yourself, your vulva and the opening of the vagina, So the reason why I'm using this bead is because it actually kind of does look like this. So I'm taking the vulva here, and my bead's not staying here. You actually see the opening of the bladder. If it's ascending down, it looks actually kind of like this. It's kind of like jagged looking, not smooth. You see the opening of the bladder, the urethra, so you see a little hole, and then there's all this tissue hanging underneath that. That's usually the urethra, and that can actually hang out low first, and that's called a urethrocoel. If I was to take VAGINIA here, and so this is what you would see. It'd be bigger than this, of course, probably, but you'd see a bit of a bulge hanging down. Now, if your bladder, the rest of your bladder is also a little bit low, what you tend to see then is you see a little, and now this is really out, but you do see this. It's almost like a balloon or a cherry when you bear down, and it's smoother. That would be a cystocele, more of your bladder coming down. If it's both, then it's a urethrocystocoel. They're all fancy words. As I mentioned before, because the uterus sits behind the bladder, you may not see the uterus. If the uterus is descended down a little bit more than the bladder, what it looks kind of beveled. It's a bit different looking. It's not like a cherry or a balloon or jagged kind of tissue. It looks more like, I describe it like a tulip, kind of jagged, just because that's the cervix, the opening. So with respect to the rectum, it usually bulges out the back of the vaginal wall, so the posterior part of the vagina. And what you'll see is another bulge basically at the back if you look. So if you have 3 bulges, there may be 3 different things prolapsing out. So again, it's good to look at yourself to see what is normal, because that can change, unfortunately, as we go through the fun decades of womanhood. So that is what a POP, or a pelvic organ prolapse, is. So you want to catch it early. Even if it's ascended down a bit, you can prevent it from coming out. I think so, clinically, because definitely I've had a lot of ladies that things have lifted. Does it go back to 0? Maybe not, but you want to prevent it from coming out and saying hello. Once it comes out and says hello, it's usually not a good thing. You want to prevent your pelvic organs from doing this, if you imagine it hanging out, because once it gets out of the vagina, it's usually not a good thing, and you may have to have surgery at that point. So let's prevent it from saying hello and staying inside. It is so important to have a look at your vulva and know what you look like if anything is lower than it should be. I see so many women now, especially postpartum, that have some degree of prolapse. I'm not sure why it's more prevalent now. I did a talk with a urogynecologist in Ottawa, and he seems to think bigger babies, but I also seem to think, yes, bigger babies, but women want to get going and returning to their normal activities such as running and things that are hard on the pelvic floor earlier than they should. So as a pelvic floor physio, I see a lot more prevalence of these POP, or pelvic organ prolapses, especially postpartum. So it's really important to get to know your vulva and have a look, and also prevent these from occurring. And that's what I'm going to talk about in a subsequent video, because you want to prevent things from hanging out and prolapsing right out like VAGINIA's doing right here. Because once they hang out, and that's like a grade 3 or grade 4, the prognosis is not as good in terms of conservative treatment like physiotherapy, and usually you have to have some other intervention. So let's keep it inside. And you can see VAGINIA's had, 4 kids? I said she had twins, right? Yeah. And so she's a little bit wide open. If you see anything that's lower, please see your doctor and see a pelvic floor physiotherapist, because they can give you some good tips to increase the function of the pelvic floor, make it stronger so it can support these organs, and give you preventative tips to prevent pressure pushing down on those pelvic floor organs. So if you're not as open or atrophied, or some people may call it loose, so you have more muscle tone, the pelvic floor muscles will hold up those pelvic floor organs. Thank you so much for tuning into this video about POP, or pelvic organ prolapse. And I appreciate you commenting below. Any suggestions at all would be appreciated. And please hit that subscribe button and share with your friends about what a POP is. And please tune into my other videos, as I will discuss preventative techniques for the pelvic organ prolapse, and treatment, and exercises to avoid and to do for a POP. VAGINA and I thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you soon.